Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Today we are on part 2 of Dad, Thad, and My Skateboard. Here we go. Let's get going, Connor, Thad called. On it. Connor turned on the ignition and slowly drove the boat away from the docks. Thad helped me stow away my skateboard into a compartment in the boat's floor. Once we exited the no-wake zone, Connor tripled our speed, and the boat flared 2 long wakes behind it. I couldn't help smiling as we bounced over waves with the warm wind racing against my ears. I had no idea a speedboat could be so exhilarating. The farther we sped across the lake, the more excited I became. The wind made it too loud to talk, but Bryce came to sit next to me, and Thad sat across from me. Both of them had huge grins on their faces, probably secretly laughing at my obvious delight. Or maybe it was because my hair was blowing every which way. I slipped off the hair tie that I always kept on my wrist and secured my hair at the nape of my neck. I caught Thad staring at me, to which he smiled easily. "So my hair's a mess, get over it," I said playfully, raising my voice a little so Thad could hear me. Thad's smile broadened. "That is not what I was thinking." Finally, Connor stopped the boat. "All right, this spot looks good. Who's up first?" "I think Stacy should go," said Thad and Bryce in unison. I glanced back and forth between them. "What is this? You know I've never wakeboarded before." "We'll teach you," said Thad. I shook my head. "Nah, I'm just here for the ride." "All right then, I'm going," said Bryce. He opened up the same compartment my skateboard was in and pulled out a life jacket, which he quickly put on. Then he jumped high off the side of the boat and into the lake with a perfect dive. "Show off," Chrissy called when he came up for air. Bryce shook his wet hair out and grinned. "Throw me the wakeboard, will you, Chrissy?" Chrissy carefully tossed a black and white striped wakeboard to her friend. Thad walked to the back of the boat and threw Bryce the rope attached to it. Bryce quickly found the handlebars, and Connor straightened out the boat so that the rope was directly behind it. "Let me know when you're ready," Connor called to him. "Hit it!" Bryce shouted. Connor hit the gas, and within seconds, Bryce was standing on the wakeboard, gliding over the water. "Wow," I said softly. Bryce boarded in and out of the boat's 2 wakes with ease. With intrigue, I watched him glide over one, then the other. At that moment, I knew this was something I had to try. I loved the rush of cement under my feet when skateboarding. The water looked twice as fun. "He's good, right?" Thad yelled to me over the wind. "Yeah, he is," I called back. I watched Bryce for another few minutes, then turned back to Thad. I jumped when I realized he had moved to sit next to me. He rewarded me with a broad smile. "Have you ever been to Lake Mead before?" he asked. I shook my head. "How long are you visiting?" "The whole summer." Thad's eyebrows shot up. "Really?" "Yeah, I'm staying with my dad." "What about you? How long are you visiting?" "Oh, I live here." "At the lake?" Thad laughed. "Pretty much. Who's your dad? Maybe I know him." "George Steiner." Thad's eyebrows shot up higher this time. "George Steiner's your dad?" "Yeah, so?" "I never knew the top dog had family." "Top dog of what?" Thad laughed, obviously thinking I was playing with him. "Hey, Connor! Stacy's dad is George Steiner." Connor did a double take. "What? Are you kidding?" Suddenly, Thad leaned over his knees and bowed his head low. "Oh, man," he groaned. "What?" I asked him. He lifted his head just enough to look at me. "After seeing your dad's boat, I can't imagine what you think of this one." "My dad has a boat?" Thad laughed again. "Dude," Connor called, "will your dad let us ride in that? I could totally board off the top of it and—" "Connor!" Chrissy yelled. "Bryce is down!" "What? Oh!" Connor immediately slowed and spun around in the other direction to pick up the fallen Bryce. Bryce climbed into the boat, his teeth chattering faster than the water dripping from his soaked swim shorts. He began prattling at top speed about his run, but I couldn't keep up. Dad owns a boat? He's a top dog? What does that even mean? Before I could go through all the things my dad had kept to himself, Thad had already pulled himself up on the wakeboard in the same manner Bryce had. Bryce came to sit next to me again. "Nice job," I told him. "Thanks." He grinned as he wrapped a towel around his shivering body. Connor drove the boat in circles to create more waves, but Thad jumped with each one and landed with a deep knee bend. It appeared completely natural to him. Frankly, he made Bryce look like an amateur. Connor veered to a more open spot on the lake so he could increase the speed of the boat. A wide grin spread across Thad's face. Then he glided in and out of the boat's wakes with the faster speed of his own. He zoomed out far to one side. Then on his way to the center, he jumped the wake completely. "What?" I exclaimed. Bryce laughed. "He's good, isn't he?" "Yeah, I'd say so," I agreed, unable to take my eyes off Thad. Thad jumped the wake again and again. Each time I couldn't help squealing, and Bryce couldn't help laughing at me. Finally, Thad rested a bit in the middle of the two wakes, directly behind the boat. He darted out to his right, but this time he quickly veered back to the center and jumped both wakes entirely. And somehow he landed upright, like it was nothing at all. My mouth fell open. How is that even possible? Thad moved directly behind the boat again, where I thought he was going to rest a bit. But instead, he spun around in circles, letting go of the rope with one hand, then grabbing it with the other. "Are you kidding me?" I cried. Now everyone in the boat was laughing at me. I laughed too as I stood to get a better view. Thad jumped the wake again, but this time his angle must not have been quite right, because he crashed into the water. "He's down!" Chrissy called. Connor keeled the gas, and I fell forward onto the floor. Bryce was by my side in an instant and helped me up. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked up at his big brown eyes. They looked more amused than concerned. I glanced over at Chrissy, who snickered at me. Soon enough, Thad climbed into the boat, every inch of him dripping. "Dude, you killed it," said Bryce, giving Thad a high five. "Thanks," Thad said, still breathing hard. "Were you showing off for anyone by chance?" Chrissy said, her voice high and lilting. Thad gave her a fleeting glare, then quickly wiped his face with a towel. "Stacy here couldn't stop squealing over you," said Bryce. "She was like, 'What?' and 'Are you kidding me?'" Everyone laughed. I blushed over Bryce's quite accurate tone of my voice. "Shut up," I said, giving Bryce a light shove. "I've never seen anyone wakeboard before, let alone that kind of wakeboarding." Thad grinned at me as he unbuckled his life jacket. "I'm just messing with you," said Bryce. "We all wish we could board like Thad. He competes. He places in the junior pro events every year." I turned back to Thad. "Really?" Thad grinned and shrugged, giving his head a good scrub now. I let out a sharp breath. "Well, I'm definitely not wakeboarding now. Not after that." "You have to," they all said in unison, even Chrissy. I shook my head with vigor. "No way. I'm not really into self-humiliation, thank you very much." "Why is it humiliating to be bad at something you've never tried before?" Connor asked. I didn't have an answer for that. "Come on, we all feel your pain. None of us knew how to wakeboard before last summer until Thad made us try," Bryce chimed in. "It's a lot of fun," Thad persisted. "Oh, stop pressuring her, you guys," Chrissy cried. I stared at her in surprise. She doesn't have to if she doesn't want to. Besides, it's a lot harder to get up on the board with shorts on. Then she turned to me. "They cause so much drag in the water." The boys nodded and shrugged at that. "I told my dad I'd meet him for lunch anyway," I said. "Do you mind taking me back?" "Yeah, let's go get something to eat, you guys," Thad suggested. "I get to board on the way," Chrissy yelled with excitement. "Then I get to be the first to board off the top of Stacy's dad's boat. Do you think he'll let me?" Connor turned to me in earnest. Who's your dad?" Chrissy asked. "George Steiner," said Thad. Chrissy's eyes bulged. "Seriously?" Chrissy glanced over me like she was seeing me in a new light. Surprisingly, it seemed to be a better one. "I think you guys might know my dad better than me." There was a brief, awkward silence. Then Thad suddenly said, "Well, let's get going, guys. I'm starving." As we made our way to the shore, half my attention was on Chrissy wakeboarding. She was pretty good too. And the other half was on my dad and his mysterious boat. And why did everyone know him? I sat across the table from my dad at the Harbor House Cafe. The building seemed normal enough, noisy and crowded. Generic pictures of fishermen and boats and lakes and cliffs hung on the walls. The faded red tables matched the red laminated menus. I never knew so many variations of trout and bass existed. Fortunately, I loved seafood. One good thing I picked up from my dad. But currently, my dad was not acting like himself. At least not a version I had seen in a long time. He was laughing and conversing with my new friends like he had known them forever. I had no idea that wakeboarding had so many talking points. Connor leaned into me on my left. "Hey, Stacy, would you ask your dad if we can ride in his boat?" "Why don't you ask him?" I wasn't sure how to bring up the subject when my dad had never even told me he owned such a vessel. "Well, because..." Connor stumbled over some words that I couldn't understand. "What's this, Stace?" Dad asked. For the first time, he looked at Connor the way he looked at Jace when they first met. I peered over at Connor and found him beet red. What just happened? I'm sorry, Connor mumbled. Connor just wants a ride in your boat, Dad. Dad leaned across the table and spoke in a low voice. If you think you're going to use my daughter to get certain privileges from me, you've got another thing coming. I wasn't trying to do that, Connor stuttered. Dad interjected. Excuse me, Mr. Steiner, said a woman who had just walked up to the table. She was wearing a red Harbor House Cafe uniform. There's an irate customer who insists on speaking with the owner. I'll be right there, Dad said, still glaring at Connor. He threw his napkin onto his plate and stood. Dad, what are you the owner of? I asked. The already awkward silence of the table thickened. Dad looked at me briefly and said, We'll talk later, Stace. Everyone at the table suddenly became very interested in finishing their last 2 bites of food. Chrissy finally broke the silence. You seriously don't know that your dad owns the harbor? What? I cried. Chrissy laughed. Wow, that's a great relationship you have there. A surge of anger seeped into my gut. Shut up, Chrissy, Thad said in a low voice. You're one to talk. Chrissy flashed him an evil eye, and Thad slumped a bit like he regretted opening his mouth. I felt like putting Chrissy in her place, but it wasn't worth the effort. Abruptly, I got to my feet. Well, nice meeting you guys. I grabbed my skateboard from under the table and pushed my chair in. As soon as I reached outside, I jumped on and rolled through the parking lot. I had no idea what I was going to do once I reached Dad's truck. It's not like I had his keys. Hey, where are you going? I heard Thad's voice call behind me. Somewhere else, I called back without turning around. Hey, hold on a minute. I heard him running behind me, but I continued to roll away. Stacy, come on. I put my foot down on the back of the skateboard so I would stop. I flipped it up in my hand and turned to face Thad. He picked up his pace and caught up to me. We still have half the day to enjoy, he said. Then go enjoy it. I will, but why don't you come with us? Didn't you hear? My dad's not going to let you ride in his boat. Hey, that's not fair. We asked you to hang out with us way before we knew who your dad was. I let out a huge sigh. I know that. It's just, I glanced up at Thad's earnest expression. He looked like he was actually listening. I almost felt like spilling my personal sob story about my parents. But instead, I said, Chrissy doesn't like me. I actually didn't care about this, but it was one true thing I could say. Thad batted a hand. She's just jealous of you. She'll come around. She's not usually such a jerk. Why is she jealous of me? She's jealous of any girl I talk to. I raised my eyebrows. You guys have a history? Thad shrugged. I crossed my arms. Let's hear it. Thad chuckled. It's not really a first day we meet kind of a conversation. I laughed once. All right, but regardless, she doesn't want me there. She'll get over it, Thad persisted. We're usually really fun, I promise. I know that. I bit my lip and looked toward the harbor house. Chrissy, Connor, and Bryce were outside, standing by the entrance, staring at us. And Connor's a good guy. He's just a little impulsive, Thad said. I know that too, I said, still staring at the group. But why do you want me to come? I asked, turning back to look at Thad. His eyes swelled and his cheeks turned slightly pink. He lifted a shoulder up and down. I don't know. I think we'd have fun together. You just want to make fun of a newbie on the wakeboard. That too, Thad said with a grin. I cracked a smile. All right then. His grin broadens. You really want to learn, don't you? I nod, unable to wipe the smile off my face. Yeah, Thad exclaimed, holding up his hand for a high five. I smacked it hard, but I have one request. What's that? Nobody even mentions my dad again for the rest of the day. Done. He held out his hand for me to shake. I gripped it in return. Now I have a request, said Thad. I eyed him with suspicion. We don't leave the lake today until you get up on the wakeboard. It's not going to take me all day, I promised. Thad's smile brightened his blue eyes. I'm sure it won't. And that concludes part 2. I hope you come back next week for part 3 of Dad, Thad, and my skateboard. And, as always, I hope you have a wonderful week. Until next time, take care.